Usopp is easily one of my favorite characters in One Piece. He isn't the strongest, flashiest, or most intelligent member of the Straw Hats, but that doesn't matter. He shows time and time again that he has what it takes to be a brave warrior of the sea. No matter the situation, you can count on him to do his part when called upon. When we first meet Usopp, we are immediately introduced to one of his most distinctive traits as a character, his lying. He puts up a facade that he is a captain of a powerful group of pirates, when in all reality it is just him and a few village kids. This group is known for no more than falsely warning the village of false pirate attacks. Another noteworthy relationship Usopp has in Surat Village is with the bedridden Kaya, a young girl whose parents passed away a long time ago. He often told her stories of his adventures on the sea. Although these stories were fake, they brought both Kaya and Usopp lots of joy. However, all of these lies later haunt Usopp, as he finds out one of Kaya's caretakers is the captain of the Black Cat pirates, Kuro. Usopp's prior reputation leaves him in ruins, as he is unable to convince the villagers or Kaya of the pirate fleet soon arriving at the village. This chain of events does lead to the first time we see Usopp make a brave decision. Despite being weak himself, he lies to his small but loyal crew to keep them out of harm's way. While it is a small moment, I think it is nice to see Usopp using his lies for something other than self-gain at this point in the story. Luckily for Usopp, he is able to gain the assistance of the Straw Hats. Despite this, Usopp has to make a stand against the Black Cat pirates all on his own because of the events that happened prior. Though he isn't able to beat them, his courage buys just enough time for Luffy and Zoro to arrive and beat Kuro and his crew. After all of this, Usopp returns to the village and decides to keep the attack a secret. This is because his reputation as a liar won't change, so maintaining the peace of the village, rather than trying to improve his image among the villagers, is much more important to him. Although this arc isn't a massive one, I think it does a great job at introducing the kind of character Usopp wants to be versus his own internal struggles. He has moments where he tries to be brave and courageous, doing everything he can in that moment to save the ones he cares about, and moments where his own cowardice gets the better of him. This internal battle is shown in full display in his battle against Chu. He spends most of the battle running away from Chu until he eventually decides to try and fight back. His efforts prove futile as he is quickly beaten and Usopp successfully fakes his death. This is where Usopp has to decide between his fear and his want to be a warrior, even if that means facing someone much stronger than himself. Lying there, Usopp remembers the reason why he left Syrup Island in the first place, and decides to face death head-on. Through a strategic chain of events, Usopp is able to overcome not only the deadly enemy in front of him, but the fear that separates him from being a brave warrior of the sea. This is also the first time we see the famous The first major arc that occurs in the Grand Line is Alabasta. A lot of things happen in this arc. Luffy faces his first Logia user, Zoro cuts to steel, and we see Ace for the first time. One moment that isn't spoken about enough is Usopp and Chopper's fight against Mr. Ford and Miss Merry Christmas. I'm not saying this because of how great the fight was to watch, but rather the courage Usopp and Chopper display here. There are multiple occasions where their opponent beats them down and they keep getting up. Eventually it gets to the point where Usopp takes a freaking 4-ton bat to the head and still gets back up. Not only that, but he delivers a really cool speech that reflects upon multiple parts of his character really well. This speech perfectly displays that even he, a weakling, knows there are times when running isn't an option no matter who the opponent is. It also shows he trusts his allies to take out even stronger opponents, meaning all he has to do is worry about the fight in front of him. Another important encounter Usopp had during the Alabasta arc was with the Elbaf Giants. Even though this part occurs before Alabasta, I wanted to mention it after because I think it is much more significant for the development of Usopp as a warrior. His encounter with the Giants is essential in reinforcing his dream in becoming a brave warrior of the sea. There is time and time again during Little Garden where Usopp uses different strategies to assist his friends and try to be as useful as possible. One massive moment he has in Little Garden is when his idea of using fiery rope saves Zoro, Nami, and Vivi. It's moments like these that show that being courageous doesn't always mean being strong. The conflict Usopp faces throughout Water 7 and Enies Lobby is very important in presenting some of Usopp's biggest character flaws up to this point. To start with is one of Usopp's conflicts with the Straw Hats when they arrive at Water 7 to try and repair the Going Merry. When they are told that the ship is beyond repair and must be replaced, Usopp has a fit. But this isn't the first moment I want to look at in Water 7. The first time we see Usopp truly despaired by his own weakness is when he loses the money to the Frankie brothers. He isn't just physically beaten down, but you can tell that in this very moment, Usopp is mentally destroyed by his own weakness. He can't bear the thought of facing his own crew, going as far as to say that he is a disgrace to them. I think this scene displays one of Usopp's character flaws perfectly. In order to achieve his goal of becoming a brave warrior of the sea, he believes he must accomplish some great feat of strength. I say this because no matter how many times he shows courage in the toughest of moments, he still doesn't know that he himself has accomplished his goal. When it comes to Usopp as a character, this scene simply isn't mentioned enough. The voice actors also did a fantastic job at making this scene that much better in the anime. This scene also foreshadows Usopp's conflict with the Straw Hats replacing the Going Merry. When the idea is brought up, Usopp declines the possibility of that happening. He says that getting rid of the Merry would be like getting rid of one of the crew members. But this view stems from the fear Usopp has that Luffy will notice his weakness and choose to let go of him too. This fear arises because he thinks if the Merry can be so easily let go, then later on Luffy will have no problem doing the same to him, because after all, he is a man amongst beasts. He doesn't provide some sort of special skill like Nami or Chopper, and he isn't some overwhelming powerhouse like Sanji or Zoro. Eventually, this conflict leads to Usopp deciding to leave the crew and challenge Luffy to a duel. This duel, in my opinion, shows Usopp's growth as a warrior. Everyone knows what the final result will be in the end. Despite this, Usopp follows through anyways. He fights for what he believes in, and he fights for those he cares about. At this point, Usopp doesn't realize that this is what makes him such a vital part of the crew. He can be trusted to fight for his friends no matter how dire the situation, no matter how overwhelming his fear is, and no matter how strong the opponent is. Win or lose, he does what any man does in the face of conflict, fights with everything he has. Despite this, Usopp is unable to see this in himself, and later behinds the identity of Sogeking. He does this because he isn't ready to face the Straw Hats face to face, but still wants to save Robin from an East Lobby, which further supports the fact that Usopp will do everything in his power to fight for those he cares about. Eventually, Usopp finds himself face up against Jabra, who quickly beats him and is moments away from killing him. With Zoro tangled up in his own fight against Kaku, it seems like Usopp is about to meet his end. Luckily, Sanji arrives just in time to save him and take on Jabra himself. He then gives Usopp some of the most important advice he has ever heard. This line single-handedly saves not only Usopp as a character, but multiple Straw Hats in just this arc alone. It helps Usopp realize that his crew doesn't just value him or others on their strength alone, that despite his physical weakness, he isn't the weak link among the Straw Hats. With this newfound advice, he goes to display something no one else on the Straw Hats could have. All the way from atop the Tower of Justice, he snipes Spandam and his men, saving Robin from being taken away and ultimately ruining the Straw Hats' plans of saving her. Later on in the arc, he even saves Luffy. Without him, there would have been no chance that Luffy would have beaten Lucci. Usopp inspired Luffy to keep fighting. Usopp very well understood that if Luffy didn't get back up, he would have been quickly killed. Despite this, he does what he can to push Luffy, who ultimately beats Lucci. Even if Usopp wasn't aware of it, he demonstrates courage without strength. Putting his life on the line like this wouldn't be done by just a man, but a warrior who understands what needs to be done in a time of need. Water 7 and Enies Lobby were fantastic arcs for Usopp. He learns multiple important lessons and faces so many different opponents across these arcs that I believe were essential in his development into a great warrior of the sea. Usopp's next moment of courage occurs against Perona. Since he's always been negative, her ability doesn't work against him, which makes him the only person capable of fighting her among the Straw Hats. He makes the decision to tell the other Straw Hats to move on and let him handle Perona. At first, this fight appears to be one of Usopp's easiest. His opponent is simply running away from him. Eventually, he comes to the realization that his efforts are ultimately fruitless. No matter how many times he seems to attack, Perona doesn't sustain any damage. As the fight draws on, Perona is able to wear down Usopp's mental state through a barrage of different tricks. After messing with his head for a while, she reveals that she can attack Usopp with her ghost, all while Usopp can't do a thing. After Perona beats Usopp down, Kumachi, one of Perona's strongest subordinates, arrives to the fight. He goes on to beat Usopp even more. Feeling powerless and weak, Usopp turns to Sogeking to find courage within himself. Revealing Sogeking here shows Usopp's internal crisis in a physical form. He doesn't trust himself to be strong and courageous when all seems lost. He has to rely on someone he views as a warrior. Even if that person is himself, he doesn't see it like that. He sees it as someone he wants to be. Sogeking has the courage he hopes to attain. Through the use of his alter ego, he is able to take down Kumashi. However, after this, his fear kicks back in. He chooses to run away from Perona because he thinks she is an opponent he can't conquer. Despite this, he uses his confident alter ego to talk himself back into fighting her, reasoning out the oddities in his fight with her so far. This not only grants him the courage he needs to beat her, but a method to do so. Poetically, as he takes one last attack from Perona, his Sogeking mask falls off. I think this nicely represents Usopp finding the courage to fight Perona on his own, rather than relying on others to face his fears. After all of this, Usopp is able to conquer Perona, overcoming his own fear and finding a way to dissociate from Sogeking once and for all. So while this fight may have been silly, it holds a tremendous amount of character growth for Usopp as a warrior. It teaches him the value of self-confidence and calmly analyzing the situation in front of him. Both of these traits are essential in making a strong and reliable warrior, and I believe that Usopp needed to attain these during his journey with the Straw Hats so he could grow into the person he wants to become. Dressrosa provides some of the biggest challenges Usopp has ever faced up to this point. To start with is the incident that earned him the title of God Usopp. It begins with a plot to take down Sugar and free all the toys in Dressrosa. At this point, Usopp has nothing to fear because the plan at its most simple level is to make Sugar, a kid, pass out. No level of combat is needed for this plan, so Usopp doesn't feel fear going along with it. It allows him to easily maintain the facade of the hero he claimed he was to the Tenadas. He also believes he isn't in any danger due to the strong allies surrounding him. He has both Robin and the Tenadas with him at this point, meaning if any fight were to break out, he would not have to deal with any kind of trouble, as the people around him would easily take them out. However, this idea is quickly torn to shreds when an unexpected turn of events occurs. Treble, one of the strongest Don Quixote pirates, throws an entire ship into the building that they are raiding. This leads to the entire plan being ripped apart. Despite the Tenadas' best effort to follow through with the plan, they are quickly captured by Treble, and Robin is turned into a toy, leaving Usopp all alone. From here, Usopp flees the scene, leaving everyone else in fear that he may be turned into a toy or die himself. To him, either option leads to his ultimate demise. Up to this point, Usopp has fought many enemies and faced the chance of death multiple times, so it seems surprising that now he acts so cowardly when in the past he would have risked it all. But what I believe is different here is he hasn't ever faced certain doom. He's always had an ally or an advantage that would save him if things got too dangerous, but facing Treble and Sugar here would definitely mean the end. There wouldn't be anyone to save him. All he was a coward amongst beasts. So he chose to run. He ran as far away as possible, looking for any way to leave, thinking of any excuse he could to justify his actions, and he would have kept going if it wasn't for the trusting nature of the Tenadas, who called on their last hope to save them. To make matters worse, Trouble began stepping on the Tenadas, and Usopp heard each and every yell from them. This was the breaking point for Usopp. The moment he turned around to try and save everyone was the moment Usopp overcame the fear of death. He knew turning around meant the end. Every step was a step closer to death. Despite all this, he appeared in front of his enemies ready to fight. Sadly for him, he wasn't able to conquer his opponents, but not even Usopp himself was surprised by this. Luckily, Sugar makes a massive mistake by trying to mock everyone's effort to feed her the berry by making Usopp have it instead. She believes that this will kill Usopp, but instead he lets out a crazy shriek and makes a horrifying face that makes her pass out from fear. This leads to Usopp saving all the toys on Dressrosa and being deemed a god by them. While this fight wasn't the greatest showing of strength, I think it was by far the most courageous thing Usopp has done up to this point. He knew what would happen if he turned around and decided to do it anyways. While Usopp isn't your typical warrior, he definitely proves throughout the show that he wants to achieve this goal despite his cowardly tendencies. The Grand Line isn't a safe place for anyone, and when you feel that you are weak yourself, the challenges you face feel that much more impossible. He faces countless fights where his opponents are considerably stronger than him, but he seems to learn so much from each one. What I like about his development as a character is that his growth isn't always some new strong technique, but instead finding a new level of confidence he didn't know he had himself. Even if we don't want to acknowledge it, Usopp is the most human of all the Straw Hats. Fans may laugh or get frustrated by his cowardice, but if we were put in his shoes, could we show half the courage he has? Could we run straight towards death itself? Even if we don't face the same types of danger that Usopp faces, I think everyone could learn the importance of courage and self-image from him. Without it, he shrivels up and yields to fear, but with it, he's able to pull off the most unbelievable feats against the scariest of enemies. He may be far from the strongest character in One Piece, but as a viewer I can't help but love the message he portrays. It's the reason I believe that Usopp is a warrior amongst men. He shows us what we can become if we face our fears and believe in our own abilities.